afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the CAN TV edition of Mothers Who Care. Today we will be focusing on Domestic Awareness Violence Month. October is designated as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so that we want to be able to provide some resources and some information, helpful information to people who may have experienced or are currently going through experiences of domestic violence. We have with us today, our guest today is Prophetess Dr. Felice A. Binion. She is she's ministered throughout the state of Illinois and is currently the president and CEO of, the president and CEO of the Westside Ministers Coalition. She also works with the Chicago Battered Women's Network and she's also a domestic violence advocate. Thank you, Dr. Binion, for being with us this evening. I just wanted to, be able to provide some information to the people about how they can keep themselves safe and keep their family members safe in experiences of domestic violence. So can you talk with us a little bit today about how we define domestic violence?
Well, domestic violence normally is violence that is in the home. Mm-hmm. And it's normally one partner with another partner, or sometimes it'll be where they're beating on the parents that might live in the home. They might be abusing the kids that's in the home. And there's three types of abuse. There's mental, verbal, and physical. So sometimes they may not have ever been physically touched, mm-hmm. but the words have wounded them, mm-hmm. which is just as bad.
Yes, ma'am. And can you talk a little bit about who can experience domestic violence?
Domestic violence can be experienced by anyone. Mm-hmm. It says statistically that 60% of Native Americans mm-hmm.
Throughout
their life would have experienced some form or some type of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are there experiences of domestic violence when it comes to, because it seems to be a trend of young people who are in relationships who have experienced domestic violence, not necessarily in the home, but within their relationships. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, domestic violence to a certain degree is a matters of the heart. Mm-hmm. And because there is such a lack of family infrastructure, mm-hmm. and you have kids raising kids, mm-hmm. And a lot of our kids, unfortunately, with all of the, I'm just going to be honest, with the budget cuts and things like that, a lot of people are more homeless. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to gravitate to what they think is a safe place mm-hmm. until they get in there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they find out after they get in there mm-hmm. that they are abused, they are mistreated. Some of them, because they care, are even sourced out into human trafficking.
Okay. And so how would you say someone becomes, what are those steps you would say people would take or that kind of happen that would have somebody in a situation that they wouldn't normally find themselves in?
Well, a lot of times, and it doesn't matter how old, how young you are. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a need to be loved and wanted. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, we give our whole hearts, mm-hmm. which is what we do, and we trust. We trust by what we see. Mm-hmm. And how we feel. Mm-hmm. And so when we get past there a lot of times there are signs and symptoms. I just spoke at an event yesterday, mm-hmm. and it was dealing with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. And when I got through speaking, I was sharing how, because I am a survivor mm-hmm. of domestic violence, and a lot of times I was well educated. Mm-hmm. I said, and they'll come and they'll tell you, I just want you all to myself. When in actuality, they're alienating you. Mm-hmm. They're pulling you away. And then they start to bring a wedge. Now, our young adults, they bring a wedge between the family and the child. Mm-hmm. And then that way, oh, Mama, why don't you let me do this? And oh, Mama, why don't you let me do that? And mm-hmm. what happens is, then now the child is angry because the mom can see or the parent can see, mm-hmm. but they can't see mm-hmm. because the vantage point is different. Okay. So then they separate them, get them out there, take them away, or a lot of times they'll move them in. Mm-hmm. Well, Mom, I want Johnny to move in with me. Mm-hmm. And then Johnny is beating her for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah. She's too embarrassed to tell. what is really going on. And she doesn't want any trouble. Well, Johnny just might share with her that, you know what, I'm abusing you, but if you tell, I'm going to hurt them as well. So now fear comes in.
Yes.
Because fear, they control you through fear.
Okay, it looks like we have a caller. Caller, you're on the line.
Yes, I can barely hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. You know what's wrong? There's abuse on both sides, but mostly on the male side. But the thing is, when you have young women, 14, 15, 16 years old, having babies, and they don't know how to raise them, what's the first thing they're going to do? Put their hands on them, because they probably learned that from their mother. So, you know, if it was a perfect world, you'd all have a husband and wife. But it's not like that. So you gotta tell the mothers, please, take a little bit of time off. Explain to your children, they're your children. Because if you don't, guess what's gonna happen? They're gonna follow in the footsteps. Right in the footsteps of their mother or their father. And if they have kids, they're gonna beat them too. So please tell everybody, just take a little time. Don't take a lot of time to talk to your children. You know, so please, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, caller.
You know, I think that's awesome. They have daycares where the parents can drop their kids off for 48 hours. And that's kind of like a time out. As well as now there's been an uprise of parenting classes and trying to help these young mothers and dealing with anger management, how to deal with children because they are frustrated. A lot of times they don't have enough money to feed them. A lot of times they can't go out and do what they are accustomed to doing before they had the kids. And then you have other factors that are involved as well. So you're absolutely right. It's like a melting pot of everybody trying to deal with it in their respective places. It's just not one way exactly that's going to deal with this issue.
Now, there also seems to be, I don't know if it's a growing trend or unfortunately, we've seen a lot of cases where mothers have left their children with their boyfriends or the fathers, and the fathers seem to also struggle with being able to discipline the child or provide or provide a safe space for their children. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that seems to be more often than not?
Because we have so many young women who are working, and the young men are not. So now you're saying you want my money, but if you want my money, you're going to have to watch your child. And sometimes it's not their child, so they really get angry when it's not their child. But we want your money, so because I want your money, or if you want my money, you're going to have to work. You know, and so if you want my money, I need you to take care of my child. You're going to have to help me. So I'm going to work and do the job, but I need you to work at home. And they don't want to do that. You know, and so that causes problems. But it still goes back to anger management. It still goes back to families that are not, and fathers that are not in the home. And this is like a melting pot, and it's like a negative feedback and a vicious circle and a cycle that we are, you know, that we all have to put our hands to the plow to bring about a change.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that it's important to have a support network. A support network, because childcare is a real issue in our communities, and we want to be able to rely on the fathers, the aunts, the uncles, our community to help us with our children. We have, in the past, we've always said it takes a village. And so we want to be able to get the right resources out to people with parenting, taking parenting workshops and positive discipline and things like that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. What would you say, no, I'll ask this question. This is something that we hear very little about. Can men experience domestic violence?
Absolutely.
And what does that look like, and what keeps men from speaking up about?
Well, because they're men. And it's the shame factor. You know, it's like, I'm a man. I'm the one that should be, you know, the head. I'm the one that should be the one that's taking it in the forefront. But you have some who are being abused on a daily basis, and they won't say anything. But then now you have with the partners now, you have men abusing men, you have women abusing women.
And so would you say that men who are experiencing, how do you think it's best that they communicate that? Would you say that they're experiencing, how would someone notice that a man is experiencing, because it seems like it would be such a hard thing to cover?
Well, you know what it is, though? You can see it by how they're treated. There's signs. If their partner that they're with is always negative and talking them down, and is always trying to put them in a bad light, that's the first sign. You know. Secondly, if you start seeing bruises and things like that, or black eyes, because that happens, just like in females, then then the radars, your antennas kind of go up, and you're kind of like, you know what, there's something else going on here.
And what is that cycle? What is it that keeps people stuck, or they seem to get stuck in these relationships for many, many years? What is it, do you think, that keeps people in those positions?
Well, in the past, when we were younger, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, we were taught, no matter what goes on in the home, that's the father, you just deal with it and you take it. In this day and age, we have learned better. When you learn better, you do better. So, but a lot of times, there is a need for the abuser and the one who's getting abused. It's like this ungodly soul tie that they need each other and they feed off each other. And a lot of times, it's almost takes for one to almost be deathly ill or die before there's a separation or something tragic to happen. Before they get an understanding that this is lethal for me.
And can you talk about the economic dependence that people experience who are going through these instances of domestic violence, or these violent relationships? Sometimes I think there's a financial dependence.
Absolutely.
That keeps people.
Now, some of them it is, because you know what? Sometimes we are accustomed to a certain way of living. And when we are forced and realize that we have to leave, because it's all about control. It's all about you do what I say because I take care of you, I feed you, I give you the money, I'm the breadwinner, so you're my object. And as a result of that, the woman, when she's looking at her kids, the nice school that they're in, the nice car that she's driving, all of the things that she normally is taking care of her as far as needs, but the price for that is that I'm going to let you beat me. I'm going to let you verbally tear me down. I'm going to let you do things that are not conducive to my growth and my well-being.
Okay. All right, looks like we have a caller. Caller, you're on the line.
Hi, my question is, if I am a family member, I'm concerned about one of my family members potentially being a victim of domestic violence, how do you recommend that I would approach talking about something like that or bringing it up without offending the person?
Thank you.
Well, you know what? There's many different ways that you can approach it. I know in times past, sometimes those who are being abused are in denial and they are ashamed and embarrassed. And because of that soul tie, it's not always easy, and they will lash out at the family members. So they're kind of hesitant in regards to speaking with them. But there are different modes. Sometimes you can just have things that have the domestic violence information that they can go to, and they can the hotlines that they can call and have that information. So when you're around them, they might come to your house. You can have it laying out, and you might have a conversation around it, and say, oh, you know what, someone, I got this card, and that number is for those who might be abused. If you know anybody, just take it and please pass it along.
What are some things that people can look for, in terms of if I'm a family member and I suspect that that my loved one is being abused, what are some things that they can look for?
The first thing they do is they want to alienate them from the family. They want to put a wedge. And then a lot of times you can't get hold of the person. You can't call. They don't want you to come by. They want you all to themselves. And you as a family member is trying to figure out, well, what is going on? You know, this is a family member that I love, and I can't even call her. Or when they're on the phone, they're whispering, or when you see them, you see bruises, you know. Or they're very subdued and in a corner somewhere where they used to be outgoing and speaking and laughing. That begins to go away. And so now this person that you're looking at is not a person that the family member even knows anymore.
So if I am someone who is experiencing domestic violence, what are some things that I can do to keep safe?
Well, the first thing is you have to have a plan. It all depends because, you know, every day people are getting killed from their abusers. So, you know, depending on the situation that you're in, you may not be able to just say, hey, I'm gone. You know, I'm out the door. Without them saying they're going to kill you if you leave them. So you have to make a plan. You have to put money aside. You have to separate. If you have kids, you've got to put things on where you're going to go. You've got to reach out, and there's a hotline that you can for domestic violence. Even if you dial, I think it's 311, they'll give you the number. And you can call, and they'll give you even a number that they'll give you, like a case number. And then they will help you and guide you. You can go to the nearest police department. You can go to the nearest hospital, and then they'll know exactly where to take you, that you can be the safest, as opposed to, it's good to go to a family member's house, but then you also have to think of those family members and what that abuser might try to do to them.
So there's a concern that the abuser may lash out at the friends and family members
Absolutely.
of their
So you really have to kind of be mindful of that, and then you don't want to ever call or let them know where you're at. Because when we, you know, we had the shelter on Chicago Avenue, and I ran it, and I worked with Inner Voice at that time, and they're no longer in existence. But there was a lady, she had maybe 8 kids, young girl, you know, and we shared with her, you know, you don't want to let anybody know. She let the abuser know. He came to the facility. We didn't know who he was. She did. She didn't notify us and let us know. She took her 8 kids, went out with him. He beat her all the way back to the shelter until we could get a hold of her. Then we had to move her and these kids out of there right away. But all of us was in jeopardy at that time.
Yes. So it's important that when you're in those circumstances, that you're also mindful of your family, your friends, and the resources that you use, because we want to keep everybody safe. Everybody is safe in those instances. If a child or a young person is experiencing domestic violence, how can we best support them? How can someone best support them?
You know, a lot of times in the school, I pray and hope that there is some training where if they see bruises on the child, it's a mandated reporting. It's a mandated reporting for those who work with any youth. Even if you are clergy, if they come to the church, if you see any bruises, anything that's out of order, you are required by law to report it. So there are mechanisms in place for these kids.
So mandated reporters are required to report any they don't necessarily have to investigate.
That's right.
Just that there's a suspicion.
That's right.
That there is abuse going on. All right, and is that the case only for children? Who else is that the case for?
Well, I know it is for kids, but if I'm not mistaken, anybody that you know that might be abused, but you also have to understand, they might tell you that they're not abused. So a lot of times when it comes now to elderly, yes.
So children and the elderly.
For sure.
Okay. All right. And what are the effects of domestic violence on children?
It has a mental effect, because a lot of times when kids are raised in an abusive relationship or home, it changes and makes it a new normal. And in making it a new normal, they think that behavior is acceptable and that it is okay. So then when they get older, they begin to act out what they saw their parents do and what they saw in the home. And then they find out later on that it's not the right behavior. And so we don't want our kids mimicking it, but because they're very pliable as children. And they're like little sponges. And as a result of that, they will wind up beating and even going to school and acting out.
So it sounds like what I hear you saying is that children who experience domestic violence, they grow up where dysfunction is the norm.
Yes, absolutely.
And so they carry that on. And so it's important that as parents and as family members that we model appropriate relationships. And that can look like a lot of different things. What would you say a healthy relationship looks like?
Well, a healthy relationship, you know, if your child is getting beat on, if your child is being called out of their names on a regular basis, is your child mentally being abused in regards to if you do this, I'm gonna kill you, you know, and things like that. That's not normal. That's not a healthy place. And a lot of times, because this is happening in the homes, we're wondering, and I must share this. It is also perpetuating even in the gangs and on the corners, because in some of these homes, what you see them doing outside in regards to violence is what was going on in their homes.
And I just want to point out that if you find yourself in a situation where there's verbal, emotional, or physical abuse, there is help available. It's not always easy to leave those situations. It's not always easy to just walk away, because we love who we love. We feel emotionally attached to people who may perpetrate violence against us. We feel like we owe them. We want to protect them. We don't want to hurt them. And so these are also reasons that people stay in these relationships. We also are financially, we talked about this a little bit earlier, we are financially dependent. You may be financially dependent on someone, and you feel like you can't make it because they've isolated you from your family, they've alienated you from your loved ones, and so you feel like you can't go to them. You feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed. And we just want to let you know that there are resources available to you, and the best thing that you can do in those situations is to go to the local police. That's the first place to go, so that you can get the appropriate resources. Because you want to be mindful of your loved ones and your community. We want to keep them safe, and sometimes abuser behavior can be pretty unpredictable.
Absolutely.
If you are someone who is looking for information on resources, please, I'm going to go ahead and put the information up there. You can contact Mothers Who Care, Zelina at increasetheharvestinc.org. That's ZERLINA at increasetheharvestinc.org. Thank you so very much for tuning in to Mothers Who Care, this episode here on CAN-TV. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Bean. It was great to meet you. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you to Mothers Who Care, who are dedicated and focused on providing the community with the best resources available for help. Thank you.
Thank you.